Escape from reality.
Having never played any Legend of Zelda game for longer than an hour, and having zero interest in ever playing a Dark Souls game, Death's Door didn't really seem like the game for me. I don't really play a lot of these puzzle action-adventure games, especially ones that can get really repetitive and force you to do the same fight 15 times in a row to get it right. But the dark and gloomy art style of this game drew me in almost immediately. I had to play it. This video was originally intended to be a review of Death's Door. I was going to talk about the story, the gameplay, the visuals, the music. It was going to be a whole thing. But as I continued to play more and more and think about it, I realized that the story of the game was the only thing I felt like I really needed to talk about. If you're still interested in my full thoughts on the game, because I do love the game, it's one of my favorite games of all time now, the first link in the description of this video will take you to an informal review that I did on my other channel, just me talking unscripted about the game. I am fascinated by death. It's a bit dark, yes, but it seems to follow me everywhere I go in life. The day before I turned 6 years old, my grandfather passed away, being the first person I ever knew to die, and he was the first of many more family and friends to go. In my first year of university, we had to do a presentation in front of the class on something that inspires us, and I chose the concept of death. The idea that one day we won't be here anymore, that this will all just go away. There is no single hobby or interest that I have that hasn't somehow been affected by someone dying a seemingly early death. Actors, YouTubers, comedians, musicians, wrestlers, hockey players. It sometimes feels like a shadow always walking behind me closely. I don't say this for sympathy, and I know many others have experienced the same thing and to far greater losses as well. But it's been such a reoccurring theme in my life that I've taken a great interest in it. How people accept impending death, and how those left behind move on. I wasn't really thinking a lot about the idea of Death's Door when I picked up the game. It was an amazing visual experience, but the story didn't really begin to process until I was almost done playing. What I ended up experiencing was a game that brought to the forefront so many thoughts that I have about mortality. It brought up some interesting perspectives, perhaps sometimes uncomfortable, but what ended up being one of the most fun experiences I've ever had gameplay-wise also ended up being one of the most memorable stories I've ever played. We're going to go over the story of the game, and then we're going to talk about these characters and how each of them face their mortality. As I said in the beginning, warning, death is a heavy subject for most people, especially after the last few years that we've had. So if this is not something you can stomach, or maybe this kind of thing triggers strong reactions within you, it's okay to skip this one. I'm not offended, I understand completely, not everyone likes to think about this kind of thing. For the rest of us, welcome. I hope you are well, and let us walk together and open Death's Door. Since I can't really talk about the story without going over the story, spoiler warning ahead. While I think that you can still enjoy this game fully knowing the story and all, please do yourself a favor and go play this game first. Also, since the game has no voice acting, but I wanted to show off some of the in-game dialogue, and I didn't want it to just be me reading everything in my monotone voice, I got some friends of mine to help me out and do some voice acting for me. Their links are all in the description. Please go give them a follow. They're all great people. Upon exiting a bus, we have our protagonist, an unnamed crow with a sword on his back, as he finds his way into the Hall of Doors, where he works as a Reaper of Souls, collecting souls for the Commission. We meet Vaga, who seems to be a homeless crow, Ball Plart, head of security, who really doesn't care about anything, and Chandler the Handler, who gives us our first assignment. The assignment is to collect a giant soul by killing a forest creature. However, we are warned that once the door is opened, we become mortal, and therefore we can age and can die. The door cannot be shut until we collect the soul and return it, and therefore closing the door is the key to maintaining immortality. As we defeat the monster, we are promptly knocked out by a much bigger crow named the Grey Crow, who steals our newly captured soul. On our way to confront the Grey Crow, we meet Stedhone, the gravedigger of the mountain area. While he tends to the graves in this area, he also seeks death himself, being, quote, burdened with unending life. While we will not be able to do any damage to him or kill him, Stedhone invites us to try again one day should we become stronger. Making our way to the top of the peak, we finally meet the Grey Crow, standing in front of a large doorway. The Grey Crow explains his past. He was once a young reaper like us, but the soul he was sent to reap escaped and hid past death's door. Lots of time has passed since he started to track it down, and he has now aged considerably, no longer able to fight as well as he used to. He stole the giant soul from us in hopes that it was enough to open the door, but inadvertently sentenced us to a similar fate as him. As our soul is now too stuck behind the door, we are now stuck being mortal.
Oh, hello, fledgling. Sorry about the crack on the head, but I needed that soul. You see, I was a reaper, just like you. Years ago, my assignment evaded capture. It took many months to track it down to this location. Upon arrival, I discovered it had somehow passed through this door. Inconceivable. Do you know where we are, fledgling? The endpoint for all life. I thought it was just a legend. As you know, all doors are powered by the energy of souls. Perhaps with a truly monumental amount of power, even this one could be forced open. Sadly, the soul I stole from you was not enough. I'm afraid that our fates are very much intertwined now, fledgling. For with your assignment incomplete, your death is now an inevitability.
The Grey Crow proposes that you hunt down 3 giant souls, that of an old witch who has done everything she can to avoid death, a frog who claims to be king, and a monster on top of a mountain. The crow believes that these 3 souls will be enough to open death's door, allowing both you and him to retrieve the souls lost behind the door and once again regain immortality. First off, we head to the witch's estate, where we meet Pothead, a man with a boiling pot of soup for a head.
Judge me not by the shape of my head, but for the deliciousness of the soup inside!
Will forever be one of the greatest lines I've ever heard in a video game, and I will definitely be getting a full back tattoo of this quote. He asks for our help to breach the gates, and once we do all the work for him, he reveals the witch cursed him with the pot as a head, and that his only desire is to have her undo it. Inside the estate is a door that demands that 4 souls be collected before it can open. The souls are scattered across the estate and are that of reapers who were sent to kill the witch or someone inside the estate, but sadly failed their mission, were abandoned by the commission, and left to die. Upon releasing these souls, they speak of betrayal, confusion, and wondering why someone known as the Lord of Doors never came for them. While freeing the Reaper souls, the Urn Witch will constantly show up and make veiled threats towards us, during which it's revealed that Pothead is actually the witch's grandson. After the passing of her husband, she believed that she could fool Reapers by turning everyone's heads into urns, using the logic that no life force can be detected from inside an urn, thus effectively keeping everyone she knows alive forever. Pothead resisted the spell, forcing it to go wrong, and his head was turned into a soup pot instead. When you talk to Pothead about this, he asks you to end his grandmother's suffering, allowing her soul to finally be at peace. This leads to a confrontation with the witch deep in her lab, where she is finally defeated. Stedhone, being the gravekeeper, recites a eulogy.
We gather here today to mourn the passing of a woman known by many names. The Witch of Urns, the Ceramic Sorceress, Earthenware Enchantress, Crockery Crone, and of course, Grandma. Driven by her maternal instincts and consumed by her endeavors to outwit death, she filled her life with a passion for magic, reanimation, potions, and pots. Her journey is now concluded, and she is now at peace. Bow your head in remembrance, pay your last respects. Her time in this world is over. She died as she lived, with a pot on her head.
Pothead remains cursed with a pot head, but the first giant soul is collected and we move forward. Upon leaving the estate, we suddenly find ourselves in the presence of the Lord of Doors, the one who oversees the entire Reaper Commission. Done seemingly by mistake, the Lord observes the soul energy radiating from us because of the giant soul and sends us on our way before eyeing death's door through their window. During this time in between missions, we are also free to wander around the office area, and we find mission logs that tell the story of one of the Reaper souls that we freed. Apparently his colleague had noticed he was missing for quite some time, but when he tried to check up on him, his door was closed due to orders from upper management, hinting at more corruption at play. Next, we head east to the flooded cathedral to dethrone a self-proclaimed king. On our way, we meet the Forest Mother and her children. The forest has locked the gates to where we need to go, but the Forest Mother can communicate to her using her horn, which we retrieve for her. After playing the song, we continue on and enter the Mushroom Dungeon. Upon entering, we encounter Clever Grunt, a former servant and now currently a prisoner of the Frog King, who opposed the Frog King's ideas and simply wanted to be treated as an individual. As we make our way through the very confusingly laid out dungeon, we encounter another door requiring another 4 Reaper souls to be freed to open it. Along the way, the Frog King will make sporadic appearances, much like the witch, only he will taunt us and also occasionally attempt to form a truce. The bird's souls yet again speak of being abandoned, talking about the doors malfunctioning, how the dungeon doors have been sealed, but also the doors leading back to the commission have been sealed. They have been left to their fates without ever knowing why. After the souls are freed, as well as freeing Grunt, who says he will forever be thankful, we focus our eyes on the Frog King. The Frog King also interacts with us while we make our way through this next section. He tells us that he is the way he is because he has somehow been feasting on the stray souls, most likely those of his subjects that have been suffering under his rule. We enter the final room of the dungeon and at last come face to face with the newly armored King of the Swamp, guardian of the flooded fortress, lord of his domain, holy bastard without middle and destroyer of the fathers. Really, what toes? Anyways, really clever. Worse frogs, right? Him and his mates too. Okay, hit the word count. After a long confrontation destroying both the frog and his armor, the Frog King's reign comes to an end, and we collect our second giant soul.
We gather here today to mourn the passing of the Frog King. A bold and fearless leader, he was persecuted for his simple desire to place all in the forest under his rule. And occasionally, his bottom. His reign is ended, and his absence will be felt across the swamp. Bow your head in remembrance, pay your last respects. His time in the world is over.
Our last giant soul is the one we are given the least information about. All we really know is that there is a giant terrifying beast who has rained terror on the inhabitants of this mountain for a lifetime. We meet a drunken crow outside of a restaurant called the Stranded Sailor, who can only let out drunk cries for someone named Betty. On our way, we meet Barb the Bard, who accompanies us to find inspiration for their new song. Barb also tells us that the crow supposedly lost his love to the beast, but that's all the information that we're given. We first head to Castle Lockstone. The castle itself, known as the Frozen Fortress, acts as a final resting place for the former Lord of Doors. Along with freeing the souls of our fellow Reapers, we also encounter the gravesites and spirits of the Lord of Doors, who were in charge before the current one. The birds speak their usual lines. Some feel it tragic to die in the resting place of the Lords, a being that represents what they've hated for so long. One hints that the current Lord plans to live forever, and yet this Reaper is left to die here alone. As for the Lord of Doors, we visit their statues and get to briefly converse with their spirits, and hear how the 4 previous lords felt about the job that was given to them. We first meet Lord Lockstone, whom the castle is named after, whose plaque said he made a deal with death himself.
We Lord of Doors were an anomaly. A mistake of the universe, some might say. But is that not an apt description of all life?
Next, Lord Theodore, who expresses much regret for their time as a lord.
Sweet child, look at what has happened to your life at the hands of our chaos. I was never sold on the idea of preserving the course of life and death. Each lord creates the next in succession before their death, and teaches them the Lord's path. My creator, the Lord before me, bound me to their system. All I could do was try to balance the world as fairly as I could. I tried my best to do right by the living, especially the crows, recruited into something they had no business in. If opportunity presents itself, child, ending this cycle would be what is right for the universe.
Lord Opengate, who finds our presence disturbing as he understands it most likely has dark implications, but also feels that the Reaper's presence is a sign that the universe is trying to fix itself.
Life is merely the universe experiencing itself, and as the universe seeks balance, in order things we, as parts of it, are all acting to maintain that balance. Stay true to your path, young Reaper. I sense victory in your future.
And finally, Lord Deadbolt, who says the Lord before him had grand delusions about fate. Deadbolt was the previous Lord of Doors before the current one, and claims to have extended his life force beyond what it was meant to be.
The Lord who created me had grand delusions about fate and purpose. But fate did not bind me to death's door. Duty did. No other could take on the task of controlling life and death So I bore the burden. When my time finally drew to a close, my successor paid no heed to my teaching. I feel their reign may have destroyed the balance I tried so hard to maintain.
While scaling the mountain, we find ourselves in the camp of the Free Crows, led by none other than Vaga, the homeless-looking crow we met at the beginning of the game. The Free Crows are a group that reject the Lord of Doors. The Reapers are essentially immortal, but they are due to reap souls for their entire existence, only dying when failing a mission, like the Reapers we've encountered earlier. The Free Crows wish to break the cycle. Even though it means they will age and die, they will no longer live as slaves. As such, they wish you the best and send you on your way to slay the beast, knowing that it will most likely lead to the end of the Lord of Doors. There is no dialogue between us and the beast, although the caption tells us that the beast's name is Betty, so it leads us to assume the drunk crow was in love with the beast. Either way, the beast is dispatched of, and we collect the third giant soul needed to open death's door.
We gather here today to mourn the passing of Betty. To some, she was revered as a god. To others, feared as a wild, untamable beast. And to a small few, loved as a radiant beauty. After many lifetimes lived atop the mountain, supplying locals with fur and untimely deaths, she can now rest. Bow your head in remembrance. Pay your last respects. Her time in this world is over.
We meet with the Grey Crow, and the doors finally open. We enter inside to find ourselves in a white void and come face to face with Death himself. However, it seems Death has been trapped this whole time and was hoping to be saved. He explains that the souls that pass through the door are gone, absorbed into the ether, and he dives into the story of how the cycle so many are cursed to live once started.
Soul energy has to be recycled to create new life. That's why my job was so important. Not that the living didn't hate me for it. I used to go around, reaping souls myself, then pick them up and take them beyond the veil. But it was so depressing. Not for the souls, they don't care, but for the living ones that they left behind. I wish I could let them know dying isn't scary, it's just the cycle of life.
He desired a change, and one day he was approached by a being who had the ability to create doors and portals to anywhere, and the being offered to collect the souls for him by using the doors to essentially suck in any dead stray soul. In exchange, the being wanted immortality, which Death told him was impossible, because if someone should live longer than they're meant to with nothing to tie them to their own mortality, they will, quote, decay into demonic forms. So the being's life force was extended unnaturally, but they were given a final day. This started a chain for the Lord of Doors, starting with Lord Lockstone. After an unnaturally long life, they would willingly go to die and pass on their responsibility to a new Lord of Doors that they created, until the current one, who succeeded Lord Deadbolt. They tricked Death, locking him behind his own door and making it impossible for stray souls to move on to the ether. There was no death among the living, only those reaped could be brought through. And thus the cycle has been this way ever since, for so long that many don't even know the way it was before.
But my assigned soul, it must be here. It has to be here. I tracked it to this door. It must have entered here somehow. Are you sure you haven't seen it? So, there's no hope? It must still be here somewhere. No, 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 no. I wasted so many years searching for that soul. Decades. Centuries. I refuse to die.
Enraged that the soul he is searching for is seemingly gone as it somehow managed to pass through the door into the ether, and thus there is no way for him to hand it in to close his door, the Grey Crow begins to show signs of the demonic forms we were just warned about, and we are forced to fight and defeat him. The door has been opened and destroyed, and Death has finally been set free. However, his power remains trapped, and the only way to get them back is to defeat the current Lord of Doors and end the cycle permanently. The Free Crows, led by Vega, have made their way into the office to celebrate the destruction of Death's door, and to give us encouragement as we go on to end the Lord of Doors' reign once and for all. The Lord of Doors explains that each Lord is taught by the Lord before them, and that on the day that they are created, they are also told the day that they will die. The Lord of Doors even mentions that the previous Lord, Lord Deadbolt, didn't even bother to give this one a name.
How would your life play out if you knew the exact day you were going to die? If every moment of your existence revolved around its ending, I had to do everything in my power to save myself. I know my actions are not entirely moral, perhaps not even justifiable, but I cannot just let myself die. I refuse to go out without a fight.
After a long battle, ending where it all began in the middle of the office, the Lord of Doors is defeated and utters his final words.
Please, forgive me.
And with that, the portal to the ether is sealed off. Immortality for the Reapers is ended. Death goes back to his old job. The Lord of Doors' reign is now over, and it's a brand new world.
Today we mourn the passing of a being who shaped the very fabric of our world. The end of a lineage. The last Lord of Doors. To some, they were a mysterious leader. To others, a dark cloud looming over the world. Driven by a desire to be greater than their creator. They will be remembered for their part in the advancement of door technology. Their ability to maintain order in a dying world, and their unwavering determination to evade death. No matter the cost. Their pursuits may have been unwise, but the will to live is deeply ingrained. Who is to say what any of us would have done, given the same choices as this lord? Bow your head in remembrance. Pay your last respects. Their time in this world is over.
There are 5 main antagonists in this game, and all 5 represent this fear of death. The circle of life is coming to a close, and everyone has a different way of trying to avoid it. The Urn Witch has lost a loved one. She has had what is most precious taken from her, and so she resists. She comes up with convoluted plans to live as long as she possibly can and hide from the Reapers, and it ends up consuming her. She becomes so blind that she doesn't realize the harm she's done to her own grandson when he resists the idea. In an effort to make him live forever, she ends up cursing him forever and severely lowering his quality of life, an ideal description of a helicopter parent. The Frog King claims to be simply benefiting from the system that the Lords made. He also claims to have absorbed stray souls that couldn't pass on, and he fears the loss of that power. He is bothered by the presence of those underneath him and doesn't care to make their life hell, believing that they were just standing in the way of progress. While the numerous titles are a funny bit, it also goes to show that the only person giving him these titles is himself. After the king is slain, Stedhone tells us, "Some will be pleased the king is dead, but a life is a life, and in death we are all unified." In the end, the titles and the power meant nothing, because he ended up dead, just like everyone else eventually will be. He couldn't take it all with him. Betty is the soul that we get the least about. In fact, we really get nothing. We don't know much about them, other than that she is a savage beast who has reigned over the mountains for lifetimes. She is a bringer of death to many, while also holding on to the most animalistic and natural ways to survive. Kill or be killed. Survival of the fittest. I've seen theories and people say that she is most likely connected to Titan Souls, the previous game made by Acid Nerve, but I am not familiar with the game, nor have I ever played it or looked at it, so I can't speak on that. The Grey Crow, who starts us off on this journey and accidentally becomes the catalyst that ends the cycle of immortality, has let his obsession with finishing his final task take over him completely. He doesn't truly care about us, he even risks our life just to finish his own task. When it's revealed that he can't collect the soul to close his door and become immortal again, he has seemingly wasted his life. After years of searching for this soul, he thought he found it, only to never be able to capture it. His life's purpose is effectively over, and we see the demonic form begin to take place as he realizes he has spent unknown years trying to stop himself from dying, only to be confronted by Death himself telling him there's nothing that can be done. When Death tells us that souls that stay longer than their expiry date tend to decay into demonic forms without anything to tie them to their mortality, I don't actually think this applies to the 3 giant souls. The grandmother feared death, but she still had her grandson and her entire estate to take care of. Part of her corruptness actually came from an attempt to protect her grandson. The Frog King was presumably already king and just used his immortality to mold it into his own personal paradise. And if he wasn't, he was certainly obsessed with maintaining order and control. As for Betty, it's really hard to tell because we just don't get enough information on her. If the Drunk Crow really did have some sort of relationship with her, however, it is possible there's a side to her that we never got to see and was never explored further. These souls had something to tie them to mortality, their fear of dying. Even though they had lived for possible centuries longer than they should have, the fear never really went away. It inspired them. It pushed them forward to do what they were doing. The Grey Crow turns on us when he suddenly realizes that he will die, and that there is no longer anything that he can do to prevent it. It is inevitable. His purpose and his way to eternal life are suddenly gone in an instant, and having lived much longer than he was already meant to, he takes drastic action in an unwinnable situation. And perhaps him being killed by us is the best outcome. The Lord of Doors has the most unique of the five, in that they are told exactly who and what they are when they are created. Not only that, they are given the date of their death. Was the Lord of Doors' death date given the same day that the crow killed them? Or perhaps had that day gone by centuries earlier and they were long, long overdue? The others feared death and came up with legitimate plans to stay alive. Until the Reaper had come for them, we actually have no idea how long they had lived for or would have continued to live for. Throughout the witch's estate, we see statues and paintings of people with pots and urns as heads, implying it's either been a long generational thing or she's gone back and retroactively changed them to fit her new desire to escape death. We know at least 4 Reapers attempted to collect each of their souls because we see the spirits, but we also know that they were abandoned, pretty much guaranteed to fail. There are many books and hints that imply the Commission, more so the Lord of Doors, was corrupt and didn't want these people reaped. When we first encounter the witch, she says, "So does this mean the deal is off?" Most likely hinting at a deal with her and the Lord of Doors to keep her alive and make sure the Reapers never finish their job. So in theory, they had actually achieved what they set out for, and it wasn't until the Grey Crow escalated the situation that we took their lives without any sort of indication from the Commission. After we reap the first soul, we accidentally get teleported to the Lord of Doors' office. They claim the soul now in our possession feels oddly familiar and dismiss us quickly before taking a long look at death's door, almost as if knowing that major events are about to occur. If the 3 souls fall, the door will be opened, and they know they will be the last of their name. There's also some dialogue that implies that Vaga, the leader of the Free Crows, had something to do with you being teleported to the Lord of Doors. You were sent there as a warning. And it begs the question, how would your life play out if you knew the exact day you were going to die? If every moment of your existence revolved around its ending? This lord was given their entire life in front of them, including their last day, and was determined to do anything they could to continue living. The Lord of Doors was so fearful of the end, it was all they could think about, and this is where I would actually like to step away from the game for a bit to talk about a different philosophy of thinking. Something a bit more real, but can apply the same process of thinking. Let's talk about Tom Searle, Alan Watts, and Memento Mori. I personally think that everyone should have a favorite Latin phrase. I can't really say why, but they sound so cool, and they often have deep, thought-provoking meaning behind them. There is probably a decent chance that at some point in your life you have heard of the term Memento Mori. Perhaps you heard it from the Markiplier Crank Gameplay's 1-year YouTube special, Unis Honest, who, yes, I get it, they have a very similar profile picture to me. I made this logo in 2008 when I was 13. It's not the most original thing in the world. Perhaps you were aware of the religious connotations behind Memento Mori, or perhaps like me, you've heard the numerous albums and songs dedicated to the concept, whether it be Mac Miller, Lamb of God, or my personal introduction, one of my all-time favorite bands, Architects. I'm not here to gatekeep how you found it, and perhaps you've never heard the term, but we're going to break it down here anyways, and explain just how this concept ties into the game. The most basic translation of Memento Mori is remember that you will die, or simply put, remember death. It is the inevitable reminder that you will die someday. Think Valar Morghulis from Game of Thrones, or even just the phrase YOLO, if you're old enough to remember that. There are many, many different ways to interpret something such as Memento Mori, whether it was how it was originally intended or not. You could say, for example, hey, don't sweat the small stuff, you're going to die someday anyways, so don't spend all your time thinking about it, it won't matter in the end. But you could also say, make sure you think about those little things a lot, because life is short and time is precious, and you will die someday, and those little moments will add up in the end. You could say, you messed up. You've learned your lesson, it's time to move on. You can't hang on to the past forever because you will die someday. But again, you could also say, make things right. Mend everything you've broken, because one day you will die, and you don't want to die with regrets. There are even writings that say in the 2nd century, generals would have people, generally slaves, stand behind them and say the phrase Memento Mori over and over to remind them that they were just mortal men and not invincible. Although this may not have actually happened, and it's theorized that this was just a way for people to visualize the concept of Memento Mori. In Christianity, it was used to remind people not to engage in earthly pleasures and instead focus on the afterlife. You will also often hear it associated with a common understanding of Stoicism, the philosophy that says that happiness is found by living in the moment, not being controlled by fear or desire, and that by accepting and understanding your role in the world, you can find happiness. I'm speaking in general terms, of course, it's obviously a lot more in-depth than just that. It is the idea that accepting death means accepting what your life is. It is the key to letting go of fear and making the most of the life you have. Tom Searle and his twin brother Dan Searle founded the metalcore band Architects in 2004. In May 2016, they released their album All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us, a beautifully haunting album expressing pain, anger, sadness, and confusion. Songs contemplating the idea of death, anger at God and faith, and searching for hope in a world where they felt they had lost all of theirs. Their final song on the album is the track Memento Mori, an 8-minute masterpiece coming from the perspective of someone who is coming to terms with the inevitability of their death. The lyrics scream, "I will be consumed, returned into the earth, only passing through, nothing left to hold on to." The chorus echoing the words, "As above, so below, dismantled piece by piece, what's left will not decease. As within, so without, the seasons bring relief. Let me live and die in peace." Three months after this album and these songs were released, Tom Searle, who wrote all the music for the band up to this point, passed away after a multi-year battle with melanoma skin cancer. He was 28 years old. Tom's death put the album into an entirely new perspective. The song Nihilist, which may before have been perceived as calling humanity weak and cowards and lacking faith, suddenly becomes a man letting out his final displeasures with a world he will soon be unfairly leaving. Gone with the Wind, expressing a loss of faith and falling into a deep sense of nothingness and hopelessness, suddenly hits more real when you realize Tom was writing about the fact that he knew his time was coming soon and he could do nothing about it. When he passed, part of the statement the band released about the song Gone with the Wind said, "This song will now be understood in a context that we hoped would never come to pass." And of course, Memento Mori, the final song on the album. After his death, it became hauntingly obvious that this was a final cry from Tom, trying to accept the fact that his death was inevitable. He would not survive. He knew he would not survive. And he created this final anthem to express the anger and sorrow he was feeling. Before the final chorus, Tom references a swan song, based off of an old folklore tale that says a swan will sing their most beautiful song shortly before they die. Over time, it's become a way to express a final performance by an artist before saying goodbye for good. The lyrics read, "A declaration of endlessness, I swear I will not look back, as I return into the black. When the veil lifts, how will I know? Will I see God?" To bring closure to this story, Architects released a follow-up album 2.5 years later, titled Holy Hell. As Tom had written all the lyrics prior, his twin brother and drummer of the band, Dan, took over. Many lyrics in Holy Hell are actually written in response to lyrics of Tom's on All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us. In Gone with the Wind, Tom wrote, "Do you remember when you said to me, my friend, hope is a prison?" Dan wrote in Damnation, "If hope is a prison, then maybe faith will set me free." In Memento Mori, Tom writes, "Where my heart skips 2 beats, I am hidden deep, fast asleep. The sea will part where oceans meet, finally complete." In the song, Death is Not Defeat, Dan wrote back, "Now you're finally complete. I will see you where oceans meet." In those same songs, Tom wrote, "Dismantled piece by piece, what's left will not decease." Dan responds with, "I'll dismantle piece by piece, and I will know that death is not defeat." All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us is the album shortly before Tom passed. It's his feelings and his words on dying young and trying to accept it, going through intense pain and anger and sadness and hopelessness. Holy Hell is the response written by his twin brother as a response to the similar emotions his friends and family felt after Tom was gone. They felt the same pain, the same anger, the same sadness, the same hopelessness, and the unfairness. It completes Memento Mori from a different perspective. In the song Memento Mori, we hear excerpts from Alan Watts, an English speaker who moved to the United States and wrote dozens of books on religion, philosophy, social relationships, Zen, religion, and spirituality. In one of the audio archives of him speaking titled Out of Your Mind, Alan Watts says this: "Change, and everything is change, nothing can be held on to. To the degree that you go with a stream, you see you are still. You are flowing with it. But to the degree that you resist the stream, then you notice that the current is rushing past you and fighting you. So swim with it. go with it, and you're there. You're at rest. And this is, of course, particularly true when it comes to those moments when life really seems to be going to take us away, and the stream of change is going to swallow us completely. The moment of death, we think, this is it. This is the end. And so at death, we withdraw and say, no, 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 not that, not yet, please. But actually, the whole problem is that there really is no other problem for human beings than to go over that waterfall when it comes, just as you go over any other waterfall, just as you go on from day to day, just as you go to sleep at night. Be absolutely willing to die. The most important thing for anyone to realize is that you, and every person you see, will soon be dead. In other words, from the first standpoint, the worst is going to happen. You're all going to die. And don't just put it off in the back of your mind and say, I'll consider that later. It's the most important thing to consider now, because it enables you. It is the mercy of nature, because it's going to enable you to let go and not defend yourself all of the time. What Alan Watts is saying is that by accepting death, you will no longer live in fear of it, and life will be less tiresome for you. Only by resisting the stream do you realize how fast down the water you're going. You will spend your whole life trying to hold on to something that you simply cannot hold on to. Resisting or not, the end will come. And by understanding this and being at rest for the journey, perhaps the end won't seem so soon or be as scary. And that brings us back to death's door. But before I go on, any Architects fan will tell you that 5 years later, Tom is very much missed still. His last songs, while haunting to listen to now, serve as reminders for all that he left us with. Rest in peace, Tom. Gone with the wind, but never forgotten. All of the characters in Death's Door, but especially the Lord of Doors, are fighting against the stream. They are all, in a sense, resisting what is inevitable for all of them: death. However, this universe is unique from ours in the sense that there are actually ways to avoid death, and so we see them corrupt themselves over time in order to preserve themselves. Should a thing be possible in reality, this would probably be something that we would see quite regularly. They are so afraid of dying they no longer enjoy the life they have remaining. They hurt those around them just to hold on to something that inevitably was going to fail. Even the Lord of Doors must have known that they weren't safe forever. The constant fear that something like this could happen must have always been there. Death always comes for us all. It is the one uniting thing we all have in common. The Grey Crow resisted the idea of death so much he was willing to sacrifice us and end 3 souls that, yes, were beyond their time, but not his souls to claim, just to live forever. It was his lack of acceptance for the end that he knew was coming that claimed his life. Ironically, had he accepted that he was going to die and not attacked us, he would have lived longer. The Lord of Doors knew their day was coming and did anything they could to preserve themselves. And honestly, it's hard to say that one of us wouldn't do the same. Words like those of Alan Watts about going with the stream rather than resisting are much harder in execution than they are in practice. They even admit that their actions may not be justifiable, but to be handed an expiry date on day one and have the power to stop that from happening would be a hard thing to resist. Perhaps when asking for forgiveness at the end, they do so because they see death in front of them, and maybe for that brief moment, they no longer fear it. While I read off the words of Alan Watts, we heard why he believed it was important for one to accept death, to flow with the stream. And in truth, the Lord of Doors accepted death almost immediately. But instead of seeing it as an inevitability, a part of life, they saw it as a deadline. Instead of living life to the fullest and making a positive mark, they let it crumble in ruins. They accepted it, but in the wrong way. Instead of resisting the stream, and instead of flowing with the stream, they swam towards the end. The Lord of Doors sacrificed the very reapers that worked for them, just to preserve themselves, and even in the process they allowed 3 tyrannic souls to live beyond their times, causing the suffering and possible deaths of countless more. Those who fear death are most likely to waste their life running from it, rather than enjoying the life that they've been given. And this brings us to the Free Crows. The Free Crows are essentially slaves, born into a life where they are told to reap the souls of the living. Day in and day out, they are assigned a task, and one of 3 things will happen. They will collect the assigned soul and return to immortality until the next one, die in pursuit of the soul during the brief time that they're mortal, or simply not pursue the soul and die of old age, which the Grey Crow was very close to doing. The Free Crows are not suicidal, they have eternal life but not the freedom to enjoy it. They are caught in an endless cycle with no way out other than death. The thing with freedom is that it comes with risks. Like anything in life, choosing the stable option, such as staying at the same job for many years, can come with a comfort, but also a numbness. There are few chances things can go wrong, and that can almost disconnect you from reality. Whereas with freedom, in the Free Crow's case, they are sacrificing the chance to live forever. Age will come for them, quickly, along with other factors. They are opening themselves up for heartbreak, devastation, premature death, but it's a sacrifice that they're willing to make. In a bit of an ironic twist, the crows we interact with most are actually the spirits of the reapers left behind. And as we hear how the Lord of Doors betrayed them, how the Commission betrayed them, and how they lost their lives tragically, we almost find the Free Crows envious of them, because they are freed from the cycle. The crows in the dungeon are most likely left and abandoned by the Lord of Doors intentionally, knowing that should the 3 giant souls fall, death's door will most likely open, and knowing that death will be released shortly after that, the Lord knew their time was coming. Speaking of death, he has a very interesting point in this game. He wishes to tell people that dying isn't scary, that it's simply a part of the cycle of life, and that it's hardest for the people left behind. And this is most likely true to real life. Sure, maybe the process of dying can be painful, and if you believe in an afterlife, then you most likely believe in a painless life beyond, but the idea remains the same, that once you are gone, you'd feel no pain, no regrets, no sadness. The pain is for those who are left behind. And death had to be the constant to see all of the people the moment their loved one was gone. And understandably, he was tired and needed a break. But over time, after being trapped, he grew to understand how important his role was in preserving the cycle. A world where no one died was somehow much more grim than a world where people lived out their lives naturally. There is one more character to talk about, and that is Stedhome. Steadhone tells us that he lost a friend many moons ago, and when he buried his friend, a piece of him felt lost since that day. Steadhone has wished for death since that day, an opposite approach from the witch, who did everything she could to hold on to her life. Steadhone patiently awaits his time, but almost eagerly. In one of the most morbid moments of the game, and yet right near the beginning, the player meets Steadhone, who seems rather excited that he is in the presence of a Reaper. We try to strike him down to no avail, in which he tells us that he is seemingly cursed with unending life. He has spent his entire life seeking answers and has yet to find any. Why is it the one who writes eulogies for others and helps their loved ones move on, unable to move on himself? Even when speaking his eulogies, Steadhone sees the human side to those he speaks of. He acknowledges that while many saw them as tyrants and villains, that they were also loved ones, and at one point in time, respected by many. He does not live in a world of black and white, but rather the shades of gray, and he knows that in the end, death unites us all. Here we have a character who struggles with immortality. He has lost the one thing that means the most to him, and life has now become a burden. He is the first real character we meet, followed by a character so obsessed with chasing down an old soul just so that he may live forever, followed by 3 giant souls who all wreak havoc over those around them. They all seek what he has, and yet he seems to be the only one who doesn't want it. And it makes you wonder. If the witch had lost Pothead too, would she have felt it was worth it to keep on hiding from death? Or would she accept that her time was coming? If the Frog King was not a king at all, would he want the immortality? Or did he only want to preserve himself as long as he was at the top? If the Lord of Doors didn't know their end date, would they have fought so hard to stay alive still? Steadhone says he has searched for answers for years. He doesn't know why he can't die. However, there is post-game content where one can collect a locket at the grave of his friend, Monty. Bringing the locket to the gravedigger seems to trigger a reaction in him, which causes a fight to break out, and once defeated, he simply says,
Thank you, Reaper. My time in this world is over.
And so what does it come down to? A witch trying to protect her family. A king trying to maintain his throne. A creature surviving on animalistic instincts. An old soul filled with regrets and too proud to let go. A lord destined for the fate assigned to them, doing anything they could to live one more day. A group of rebels who would rather die free than live as slaves. And the gravekeeper, the one who has the eternal life everyone desires and yet seems to be the only one who doesn't want it. They all have one thing in common, however. One way or another, no matter how hard they tried to resist the stream, to hang on to everything they could, death came for them. Many people feel this existential dread when they think about the fact that they are going to die someday. I get it too. Sometimes I lie awake at night and just wonder about when my time will come, but I've accepted that it will. I think back to my family and my friends and my heroes, and I wonder if they accepted it when their time came. When the Reaper called for them, did they go willingly, or did they resist and fail to treasure their last moments? Did they resist the stream, or did they go with it? Death's Door is much more than a Zelda and Dark Souls clone. It's a game about fear. It's a game about self-preservation, about mortality, about letting go. If you found yourself watching this video and maybe you feel a little bit off right now, that's okay. It's a heavy topic, and sometimes it's one that people will avoid right up until the end of their lives. Take a moment. Breathe. Live in this moment. The end will come one day. Maybe sooner for some of us than others, but for now, you're here. And eventually, we all cross the same line. We have a long way to go, and we'll make the most of it while we can. And when our time comes, we will go with the stream. To end this video, I'd like to recite the last stanza of my favorite poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. This can be interpreted in many different ways, but I think you'll understand the way I interpret it. It reads, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Memento Mori. Remember death."